They'd probably get it in their heads that they could just make their own sanctioning body, and the FIA...
There's way too much going on here. There's so much going on. So the FIA didn't want to lose power. They refused to help these teams in any way, shape, or form, and essentially they were just calling their bluff. What is going on, guys? It is JJ here, back with a new video, and this has been a highly requested one that we get into, obviously coming off the back of the Do Americans Know Anything in F1, and coming well off the back of learning more about the Australian Grand Prix. Everyone continues, actually learning more about the Ferrari F2004, has led to a direct line to what many consider, oh my god, there's so many factors into this because the introduction of the Vegas Grand Prix is also a part of this. The United States Grand Prix of 2005. Now, if I'm not mistaken, this is in Indianapolis. It is what some consider the worst Formula race in F1 history. And I know absolutely jack shit about it, and I'm excited to get to learn it because I feel like it's learning Formula 1 races and learning Formula 1 history has been amazing. It's been mesmerizing actually because there's so much deep-rooted history, so many details, so many sort of like butterfly effect things that happen from each of these races, and they all sort of mesh into one when it comes to the old races, and apparently this one specifically. So we're gonna get into the worst Formula 1 race of all time. You guys have to let me know your thoughts on this. Kick back, relax, get yourself a nice soda. Hopefully you guys are watching this at a nice, reasonable time, and let's get into the worst F1 race of all time. As well, guys, you can find the original video down in the description below. Please go take a look at it. The guy put in, as you can tell with 15 minutes, a lot of work into it. Definitely go watch it. Go watch it too. Watch it along with me. Let's do this.
The day is June 19th, 2005. And
oh my god.
Racing in America, as we know it, is about to die. As the car...
Well, that's false. I'm sorry, I'm fixing the quality here. I mean, this is obviously a hindsight 50-50 video, but now we have 3 races.
An eerie tension looms over the Indianapolis Motor Speedway.
So I'm going to eat one
candy.
Circulated
all week about a potential walkout by teams after several horrific tire failures and near misses during the earlier practice sessions. But everyone is suited up and rolls off on schedule. Hopefully the issue is resolved. However, as the cars come around the final corner, to everyone's horror, car after car pulls into the pits, and only 6 line up on the grid. Surely this is some sort of mistake. They can't do this, right? An estimated crowd of over 110,000 watches in stunned silence as the lights flick off and the race begins. After the cars scream off into turn 1,
starting from the pit lane, right?
The aluminum and steel canyon of Gasoline Alley is the chorus of boos and curses. Before even 3 laps are completed, tens of thousands of angry fans have left the track and swarmed the nearest ticket booths, demanding refunds. Police and security personnel can barely contain the incensed mobs. 6 cars will start this race, only 2 will finish on the lead lap.
Why? What the hell happened? Why?
For Michael Schumacher, this farce of a race will be his only win of the year. For his teammate Rubens Barrichello, it'll be his best finish of the year. And for Thiago Monteiro, it'll be the only podium of his entire career. The 2005 US Grand Prix was a complete unmitigated disaster, as it spelled the end for Formula 1 racing in America for years afterwards. But how did it all come to this? What had to happen to give us the worst F1 race ever?
I have a feeling this is not going to be good. But I like how it's a series of a documentaries type of thing this is. They put a lot of time into this.
The US Grand Prix has always had a tumultuous past.
Grand Prix?
One, no one could agree on where it should be held. Most Grand Prix events represent their respective nations at historic and important venues that showcase the country's wealth and national identity. The British Grand Prix has Silverstone, a track built upon a repurposed air base that defended the country from the Blitz during World War II. For Germany, there's the Nürburgring, tucked away in the Teutonic forests of western Germany. Canada has the Circuit Gilles Villeneuve, located on a man-made island created for the Olympics in 1976. The United States, on the other hand, has held Grand Prix events at Sebring, Riverside, Las Vegas, Long Beach, Detroit, Dallas, Phoenix, Watkins Glen, and Indianapolis up to this point. Am I missing any?
So just a bunch of random places. Although we have, I mean, Las Vegas, it's like a return to Las Vegas. And Austin, is it Austin technically? It's like COTA, and now Miami as well. So 3 of them now, and it's
And a lot of the time, these events weren't even called the US Grand Prix. In 1982, the States played host to 3 events on the schedule, the most races ever held by any country in a single season, and not one of those tracks remains on the schedule today. Hell, none of them even made it out of the decade. No matter what Formula One tried, nothing seemed to stick. For a sanctioning body that holds races in some of the most scenic places on Earth, like Budapest, Bahrain, and Monaco, a mainstay event in America is the last feather to put in the cap of the FIA, the sanctioning body for Formula One racing. A crown jewel event in America is the last box to check
Held it in a
off.
parking
The country
lot.
has a rich history of racing and a strong car culture. It should be a match made in heaven, but Americans are a staunchly nationalistic bunch and seem to prefer their homegrown racing promotions as opposed to the Eurocentric Formula One. For Bernie Ecclestone, the CEO
Which is so
of the parent
surprising.
company of Formula One, it has been his dream since he took the job back in the 70s to have a race in the streets of Manhattan, or at least have it as a scenic backdrop. He'll stop at nothing to get it, but in 2000 the second best thing comes across his desk, a race at America's most historic and iconic racetrack.
Is that
the house
Gunther?
itself.
Is that, what is it, Gunther Steiner for Red Bull? That's so sick.
The Indianapolis Motor
I'm
Speedway.
glad that I can call
Tony
it out.
George, owner of IMS at the time, completes revisions to the track so it now has an infield road course. The layout uses the front stretch but has the cars running down the straight clockwise and then has them go into the infield after what is normally IndyCar pit entrance. The track is fast with long straights and sweeping corners all over the place. But the biggest point of interest? Turn 13 or IndyCar Turn 1, a long sweeping corner with 9.2 degrees of banking. There's no track in F1 that has a corner anything close to it. It's a big hit with fans who buy tickets near the turn in droves. And the best part for the FIA? The Indianapolis Motor Speedway has already footed the bill for the renovations, and massive seating capacity is already there for a part of the country that is as car crazy as they come. Plus, one of F1's biggest factory teams, Honda, has a major manufacturing plant just an hour down the road. Hype is massive for the first race in 2000.
I mean, yeah.
It goes off without a hitch.
Seems like it would all go
Same was the
together.
case for 2001 and all of the other ensuing years. So unlike NASCAR's worst race ever, this tire scandal and walkout was not caused by a new track. Indy was a known quantity by the time 2005 rolled around. So what gives? To be honest, it was a variety of factors.
Honestly, he's spitting facts here. So it's a race that had already been happening. It's already been around. So what was so
Factors
wrong
that
with
include
it?
the politics of the FIA, track resurfacing, dumb new seasonal rules for F1, a stupidly rigid command structure,
Oh,
and
it's
our
the new
old friend,
tire
the good
rules.
old-fashioned
Only
tire
one set of
rule.
tires.
Let's start off with the tipping point for this whole cascade of
Oh,
events.
it's only
Track
one set of
surface.
tires.
By the time 2004 wrapped up, the track surface at Indy was getting pretty old, and it was time for a repave. The winters in Indiana are pretty brutal, and as such, pavement needs to be properly maintained to deal with the freezing conditions and wild temperature swings going into the summer. The track was repaved during the off-season, and to ensure that the high-speed track remained as safe and stable as possible, IMS opted to use diamond grinders to make the track surface as smooth as glass. This eliminates any bumps that might naturally form on the racing surface, which is a nice thing to go without when you're in an Indy car going in excess of 220 miles an hour. Diamond grinding can also make the track grippier and helps with water drainage in the event of rain. The downside is, though, that diamond grinding turns the track surface into a billion sharp little teeth that can cause a lot of wear on your tires very quickly. This isn't a problem, though, if you use a harder rubber
FIA
compound
tire
to deal with
issues
it. And the Indy
screwed 'em.
500, held just 1 month before the US Grand Prix, saw no serious issue deciding factor going into race week. F1's ongoing tire war between Bridgestone and Michelin. Yeah, I know I've talked a lot about tire wars on this channel in the past and why they're stupid and bad. But this just goes to show how bad they are.
And now
when they
neither
keep
one of them
creeping up
exists,
into
do they?
conversations about the
It's
worst
Pirelli
races
right
ever.
now, isn't it?
Bridgestone and Michelin's war have been pretty quiet up to the US Grand Prix. Only a few minor flare-ups in the late 90s and early 2000s are of note. And even then, the worst that would happen is one manufacturer's teams just running away with an easy W. But in a sport that prides itself on car manufacturers like Ferrari, Renault, Toyota, and Honda duking it out on the world's biggest stage, it was a bit disheartening for fans that things usually boiled down to tires being the deciding factor. In 2005, Bridgestone had just 3 teams left on their roster: Ferrari, Minardi, and Jordan. Everyone else sided with Michelin. However, on opening practice on Friday, Toyota driver Ralf Schumacher had a terrible accident in turn 13, the high-banked high-speed corner. He had had a similar accident the year prior in the same spot, which resulted in a broken back. Although he isn't injured nearly as badly as he was in 2004, he won't compete on Sunday, and Toyota calls up their test driver Ricardo Zonta to replace him. However, Zonta ends up with the same issue, although he manages to not total his car. The other
Oh
drivers
my
are also experiencing
gosh.
tire failures of varying degrees.
Okay, first off, him breaking his back, that's insane. And then the next year he's back in the same car. He's like, you know what? I'm going to defeat this course. I won't let it take me. Crashes in practice. That's insane
Or
to
at
me.
best severe
That's
blistering,
insane to me.
and always on the left side tires. The culprit is clearly the diamond ground asphalt in turn 13. The high-speed loads put on the left side of the car are just too much for the tires to handle, or I should say too much for the Michelin tires to handle. Bridgestone's teams seem to be just fine, although they are all considerably slower than their Michelin counterparts. As it turned out, Bridgestone had opted for a slower but harder tire that could withstand the higher speeds in the banked turn. Now, why did they do this? Was it just luck or some incredible act of fortuitous foresight?
No,
they just had the inside scoop. Bridgestone owns Firestone, its American counterpart, and they are the sole tire supplier for IndyCar. As soon as the repave was
completed, knew exactly what was
IndyCar
happening.
held multiple testing sessions to make sure everything was good. They had made note of the additional wear due to the diamond grinding and made adjustments for the 500 in May. Not only that, but IndyCar's build-up for the 500 goes on for an entire month. They literally call it the month of May. Bridgestone had thousands of hours of testing data to pour over when they made their F1 tires for the US Grand Prix. Michelin had no such data and went into Indy completely blind. But perhaps they should have heeded the cautionary tale of the Coca-Cola 600 held by NASCAR just 1 month earlier. Charlotte Motor Speedway had also just been repaved, and it too opted to go with diamond grinding to smooth out the track. Track president Humpy Wheeler had touted the process as levigation and said it would essentially be like artificially aging the track, so multiple grooves of racing would develop and improve the racing overall. However, Goodyear, NASCAR's tire supplier, missed the mark, and after a record-setting 22 cautions and over 100 laps of the 400-lap race were run under yellow, NASCAR learned its lesson and never used levigation at any track ever again. But Michelin either chose to dismiss these findings or just didn't care.
So they
now
had the
they're out in
evidence there for
Midwestern
them to
America, thousands of miles.
They had the evidence there to see for them. Literally months and months of evidence for them to see, and they still just screwed all of their F1
tires that are not up to spec. They fly in harder compounds as soon as they can, but they don't work out any better. After Saturday's activities, they're at an impasse. It's logistically impossible to fly in any more tires, and compounding the problem is a new rule that Formula One introduced just this year. Teams cannot make tire changes. You must run one set of tires for the whole race. Why was this rule implemented? Well, Michael Schumacher, Rubens Barrichello, and the Ferrari crew had dominated F1 in the early 2000s by getting creative with their pit strategy. Using softer compounds and smaller fuel cells, they would make more pit stops during the race than most other teams, but they would make up that time out on the track with insane speed. Thus, F1 introduces the single set rule, and it seems to have worked thus far. Ferrari are winless going into Indy. The rule did have its downsides, though. It did cost Kimi Raikkonen the win at the European Grand Prix in round 7 of the season because he had flat spotted the tire earlier in the race and wasn't allowed to change it, and it blew on the last lap. All things considered, it was a pretty dumb rule, and they ended up axing it as soon as the 2005 season was over. But right here in June of 2005 at the US Grand Prix, the rule is still law, and the FIA are digging their heels in over this one. There are rumblings all weekend throughout the paddock and the campgrounds about a potential postponement or even a team walkout. But this is in an era before social media, so things remain relatively quiet, and any plans made by the FIA, the teams, or the tire manufacturers are held under wraps until the last second. The eventual walkout that you see here didn't have to happen, and it wasn't because of lack of trying on the part of the teams or Michelin to come up with a solution. The FIA wanted Michelin teams to just go slower through the final turn, but the teams correctly pointed out that having cars go 20 or 30 miles an hour slower in a high-banked, flat-out corner with other cars going full throttle was just begging for a disaster. Michelin teams asked that the no tire change rule be lifted for them. Since they would have to pit regularly, the Bridgestone cars would be at an advantage, but the FIA didn't bite on that either. Michelin teams even asked to not be awarded points at the race towards the championship, just so long as they could still put on a halfway respectable show for the fans. The FIA still said no. All the way up until 11 a.m., just hours before the start of the race, talks were still underway. Michelin thought they had a compromise cooked up. Place a chicane at the entrance of turn 13 and let the Bridgestone teams just drive around it if they wanted to. The FIA still would not budge, saying that any alterations made to the track would violate their rules regarding inspections for track safety. And if Michelin teams went through with this, then the FIA would back out of the event entirely, meaning that the race would be unsanctioned and no FIA officials or personnel would be at the track. To which, surprisingly, Bridgestone and Michelin teams called the FIA's bluff, saying that they would put in their own personnel to direct and officiate the race. Then the FIA realized that if teams did that, then they'd probably get it in their heads that they could just make their own sanctioning body, and the FIA...
There's way too much going on here. There's so much going on. So the FIA didn't want to lose power. They refused to help these teams in any way, shape, or form, and essentially they were just calling their bluff. all for
would be
not
rendered
letting them do
immediately
one
obsolete.
turn.
F1
One
racing
turn.
would essentially be dead, in a sort of repeat of the kart IndyCar split from 1996. Well, they couldn't have that, and they just shut the whole thing down. Michelin teams can't race because the manufacturer didn't bring proper tires, and that's that. Too bad. Over 110,000 people showed up on that
And so
hot
they
June
still
afternoon
ran the race.
just to
Just
watch
come
their
up
favorite
with a
drivers do a
compromise
parade
here.
lap and park it because the FIA had to flex their muscle and stick it to Michelin. The 6 Bridgestone cars line up in their correct slots and take off, only to have one of the Jordans in the back immediately blow up and start billowing smoke. The only question now is who will get that last podium slot as the Ferraris quickly pull away. Portuguese driver Tiago Monteiro ends up with the honor for Jordan, finishing 1 lap down. Ferrari drivers Michael Schumacher and Rubens Barrichello finished 1-2. And at the award ceremony, nobody except Ferrari personnel and an FIA skeleton crew were present. They quickly took their trophies and left. The only person who looked even remotely happy to be there was Tiago, who reportedly stayed at the award ceremony for hours just partying with his team. The stands are pretty much empty well before the race wrapped up, and during the first few laps, some fans had even thrown beer cans and water bottles onto the track. Angry mobs swarmed the ticket office on the way out and demanded refunds that they would never get. At least not from the FIA or IMS anyway. Michelin actually stepped up and offered compensation for anybody who wanted a refund and issued out checks through the Indianapolis Motor Speedway's ticket office. They also bought 20,000 tickets for the 2006 U.S. Grand Prix and gave them away to spectators from the 2005 race. Champ
So
Car, which was holding
Michelin
the Grand Prix
did a
of
good
Cleveland
job.
just the very next week in the neighboring state of Ohio, offered free admission for anyone holding a ticket stub from the F1 race. The 2006 U.S. Grand Prix was held at the same track in front of a still sizable crowd, but the damage had been done. The 2007 event saw even less fan interest, and IMS did not renew its contract with Formula One racing after that.
That's so disappointing. Literally just the FIA and I mean the people who made the diamond cutting track. And because it's the FIA's rules that they couldn't change the tires in the first place. You gotta let teams adjust to the track. Like that's part of
It would take 5 years
F1.
in a completely new venue in the Circuit of the Americas in Austin, Texas, to win back
I really
America's
gotta stop
hearts
eating
and
candy.
minds
I'm
to
so sorry,
Formula
guys.
One. That and a ticket to Coda comes with a free concert by some A-list celebrity talent. How much of that race is propped up by Hollywood A-listers, I'll let you decide. Michelin also did not renew its contract with F1 in 2007 and handed the reins fully over to Bridgestone. There has not been a tire war since. Although in 2020, Pirelli got into a bidding war with Hankook tires that threatened to spiral out of control into a new war. But cooler heads prevailed and Pirelli's contract runs through 2023.
I was gonna say
We'll see
Pirelli
what happens
Pirelli
after
runs
that.
it now, don't they?
So there it was, the worst F1.
That's so disheartening for that to be the worst F1 race. And can you purely blame the FIA for this? I would like to. But let me know what you guys think down in the comments below on this. This one's a little tricky and a little weird in the first place. But yeah, it's very, very interesting to see in general. I'm glad that I finally know the history behind it so I don't have to watch the highlights because there pretty much are none. Okay, yeah. But thank you guys so much for watching and I will catch you guys for another video.